do I really like this? Am I proud of what I did? And I think it's important to ask myself those questions before publishing it or before sharing it to the world. Because I have attached too much value in the past to what other people think, which I think in one way is important, but sometimes we place all the weight, all the power into what other people think and or on the likes, on like the virality of it or like how well it did in numbers, in views, in subscriptions and all of that. But as long as I am happy with the result, as long as I'm proud of what I did, I am holding some space, so to speak, to be like, no matter what happens with this piece of something that I just did, I am really happy with it. I am really proud of it.
It takes a lot to grow your business. A lot of audience attracting, a lot of lead scoring, and all the channel managing you can manage. Plus, a lot of long days, late nights, and weekends. A lot of wishing there was an easier way. But with Breeze, HubSpot's new collection of AI tools, it's easier than ever for marketers to attract audience, increase leads, and score customers fast, which means pretty soon your company will have a lot to celebrate. Visit hubspot.com/marketers to learn more.
Welcome to Latinx in Power, a podcast hosted by Thaisa Fernandes.
Welcome to Latinx in Power. We are talking with Fran Meneses today. I'm so excited with this conversation. Fran Meneses is a queer illustrator, author, and content creator based in Brooklyn, New York. While working on projects and comics, Fran enjoys sharing her life, ups and downs on her YouTube channel and social media. Welcome.
Oh my God. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Amazing. In this episode, Fran will share how her cultural background profoundly influences her work, highlighting the impact of personal heritage on her artistic expression. Fran will explain her creative process from concept to completion and discuss the significant challenges faced as a full-time creator, along with the strategy used to overcome them. First things first, what does it mean to be a Latina for you?
Oh my God. Thaisa, when you send me this question, this is the one that makes me feel nervous the most to answer because, and we were just like chatting before we started recording, but like as an immigrant, you kind of don't think about this. You don't think about race and ethnicity, which is kind of a privilege if I think about it, but you don't think about it much when you're living in the country you were born. And I have seen other authors and artists say this out loud, like express this. Because when you live in your own country, you're just like being surrounded by people who are like you, who behave like you, it's natural. Everything seems normal. But once you are kind of like uprooted and placed in another place, in another country, in another city, you start thinking about this and like how people are looking at you differently, or like suddenly your accent makes you stand out. And so it's almost like an invisible thing until you're removed from that context. And so to me, being a Latina is intrinsically linked with being Chilena. Like, so I was born and raised in Chile, South America. And in a way, being Latina is all of those things that I miss about my country. So I think like one of the things that, like, I don't know, they're very intertwined with my Latina identity, sobremesa, which is a word that is so difficult to translate in English. But sobremesa in Spanish is basically the time you spend with loved ones after you shared a meal, and you just like talk and talk forever and ever, and just like one meal starts blending into the next one. Usually happens over weekends when time is not a constraint, it's not something that you're, oh my God, I have to go someplace. So that, for example, the sobremesa is something like very special, and it means it's very intertwined and linked to my Latina identity. And in that matter, all the words that are hard to translate in English, I will say, also like we were talking about this, but my accent is very, like, I see my Latina coming out when I talk. I remember feeling deeply ashamed of my accent when I moved abroad because it was something that I had to conceal and like keep close. I think like because I grew up in like, I'm really nervous saying this out loud because I think in a way, Chile and in many countries, as we see globally in this day and age, are experiencing racism and a lot of shame with our roots and like what makes us special, what makes us unique. I remember growing up being raised and like being taught that if I'm ever going to live abroad, I need to kind of like mimic and blend in with other people. And my accent was absolutely the opposite of that. And so I remember when I moved here, I'm like, no, I need to have like the perfect accent. Like no one can tell that I am from any, like someplace else. And it wasn't until I read a comment and someone say, Fran, actually the thing I like about you the most is your accent. It makes you stand out. And I never saw it as something positive, you know? And so all of those things in a way make me feel Latina in like a positive sense, you know, like Chilean jokes and the fruits that Chile grows. Like we have such a fertile soil in Chile. And so every time I go to a supermarket and I see fruit that was grown in my country, I'm like, oh my God, yes. So I feel really good about that. And also I think like, as in everything, there is like a kind of like a downside of being Latina as well, like the other side of the coin, so to speak, because being Latina also means existing while being removed from your country. And so it also means being away from loved ones. Also in this climate, being Latina means fear and uncertainty for a lot of people. And inadvertently, you fall into stereotypes as well. And I know like living abroad, there's a lot of people that don't have ill intent when they say these things out loud. But I like being Latina also mean being placed in a very tight box of like, oh, all Latinos like tortillas and all Latinos have an abuelita and like this same music and talk about the same things. And so it's been really interesting trying to get out of that box and being like, again, there's no ill intention when people say these things, but I think at the same time, it seems reductive, like not because I am Latina, it means that all my work and identity has to be around being Latina, you know? And so I think like trying to hold all of these things at the same time makes it a very tricky and sometimes fickle balance to hold at the same time.
Yeah, I love your answer. And I feel maybe especially now because this country, they like to put people in boxes, right?
Yeah.
They like to classify people in boxes. And I think maybe now people are realizing that, okay, not all Latinos are the same. And we are a collection of many, 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 many different things. And we shouldn't be boxing people, you know? And also it makes me reflect on something that someone that I interviewed that shared that even like the classification, being a Latina, I understand how important and powerful it is, but sometimes it's also important to be specific and maybe you identify in different ways. And there's a lot more other things you can say about yourself besides being a Latina, although we are like very, very proud to be Latina. We love our countries, our heritage and everything. There's a lot more. And I love that this conversation, I don't know, I feel that it's starting to happen now.
I agree. Yeah, because like, and I've lived in many countries before moving to the US. So I lived in Germany for a little bit and in the UK as well. And all of those countries are big countries that have place and hold a lot of influence in the rest of the world. Hence why when you move here, part of being Latina in a way and part of being an immigrant means also having kind of like an educating role towards the people around you. And this is because I guess like, and especially, I don't know if this happened to you as well, but like not a lot of people know what Chile is. Like, and when I say like, oh, I come from Chile, people don't know that country even exists. And so I'm like, oh yeah, it's a very long country, end of South America. And it's not until I say, is the country next to Argentina, people are like, oh, so, and it's not a role that I thought I was going to have when moving to all of these countries, and that I had the luck and the privilege to live. And yet I have to, in one way or another, do it because, yeah, we live in a world where certain countries hold a lot of influence, hence why there's a lot of people don't know they don't know much about what happens outside of those countries. So it's natural that we have kind of like that responsibility right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you share more about your cultural background and how it has influenced your work as an artist?
Oh my God. Yeah. Okay. So this is another question that I'm like, God, things that you don't think about until someone asks you. So Thaisa, this is weird, but like I didn't have much cultural background when I was growing up. This is the biggest irony because both of my parents went to university, and my dad used to be a teacher and like a very cultural, like so much intellect going on in his life, a habit reader, and like he loved talking and reading philosophy and all of that. But when me and my siblings, we grew up in an environment that was super precarious, both in an emotional and a nurturing way, and also in a financial way. And so when you grow up with a parent that is emotionally unstable and unpredictable and sometimes abusive, your whole attention goes into not being a nuisance to your parents, and kind of like, again, the word that we already used so far, and it's like blending in, trying to not be an inconvenience. And so I became really good at reading adults when I was growing up. And so my whole attention went into surviving. And so I wasn't encouraged to ask questions because, again, asking questions was annoying. And I couldn't explore much a sense of curiosity or like, oh, what are the sort of books that I enjoy reading? Or like, what is the music that I like to listen to? And because, again, there were no money or resources to buy books or like go to the movies or go out for dinner as a family or go traveling and whatnot. And it wasn't until I went to university where I realized all of these things that I was missing. And it kind of like, I realized that this was going to be my task. Like it depended, all of those things depended on me, like for me to figure out what kind of tastes do I have, or like the things that I want to cultivate or do research on. And so I realized I want to be an illustrator when I was in university. And so in Chile at the time, there was no references around illustration. So I was forced to look abroad for references, especially this is like not the early internet days, but there were no like blogs starting coming out when I was in university. So I'm like, okay, since I'm not able to find people in Chile that I can look up to or like see how, like to figure out how they're managing to survive or like freelance, I was looking into a lot of like references from North America and from Europe at the time. And like I started devouring books on illustration and art. And I guess like the most honest way that I can answer these questions is I'm still figuring out, I'm still like getting old has meant realizing many things. And one of those things is like how much shame I grew up in. And I'm, again, parentheses, I'm sure this is happening in a lot of places right now, but Chile and many countries, we feel a lot of shame for anything that is uniquely Chilean. We place a lot of worth on other cultures and other countries, and we romanticize the ways that other countries function and how other places and countries they do things. And so there's a lot of embarrassment with anything that is uniquely Chilean. And so I feel so ignorant when it comes to my own country for the same reason, because for the longest time I had this internal bias, this internal, like what people say, like sometimes you have internalized homophobia or internalized racism. I had so much internalized like a shame around my own country and my accent and my roots, so to speak, that now I'm just starting to untangle all of this in the last couple of years. And so I've been trying to be my own source of cultural background in, I think, like since I started like mid-20s or like early 30s. So yeah, that's the most honest answer that I can give you right now.
I love how transparent and honest you are. And I love how your illustrations are personal and relatable. And I love the colors that you use, especially because they happen to be my favorite colors, especially purple, pink, and blue. And I love the combination that you use. And I wanted to ask you, what initially drew you to illustration and comics as a form or expression?
I think like ever since I could hold a pencil, I was very drawn to comics and making my own. I think that's what pulled me in the first place. How I love being able to create like entire worlds and stories and characters out of nowhere. Like the process of like seeing a page that is fully blank and turn it into something, I thought it was unreal. Like I can't believe 10 minutes ago there was nothing here and now there's a whole story and like characters and whatnot. I didn't need anyone else as well, Thaisa. Like it was something that truly depended 100% on me. And so that autonomy, it was something that I really cherished when I was growing up. It was also a way of self-regulating. I think there were so many things that I felt that they were unfair growing up, or that I didn't understand, that they were hurting or they were confusing, times that I feel deeply alone. And the adult world seemed very weird and strange with rules that I didn't understand. And so comics were my own way of just giving sense to reality and find a place of belonging. And in a way, they were also kind of like my escape to a reality that I didn't subscribe and understand at all. And I think even till today, that's exactly how I feel around comics and illustration. As a non-reader, for the longest time, like I couldn't read books. That changed in the past 4 years. But like I also saw comics that, in general, comics are very easy to digest. They are very visually powerful and fun to read as well. And so I'm like, oh my God, if I can communicate the things that I'm learning in therapy or the things that I'm witnessing when I go outside on the street, or my thoughts, or like my beliefs, and all of the jumping jacks that I do as a person who struggles with generalized anxiety disorder, I'm like, I can convey those feelings to people. It's almost like you're taking someone on a ride. And so you're holding my hand as I'm showing you something, a process, my trauma, something that happened to me, and you're able to witness it as a firsthand, as I'm witnessing it as well. And I think that process in comic is just like insane. You're able to stand on my shoes, or I can stand on other people's shoes. And I love that empathy side of comics as well, that they're able to transport you to other places. And so I really like the freedom and the autonomy that comics give you. And also, again, growing up in having no means or like no money for doing a lot of things, you just need paper and pencils. And so I love how much you can do with so fewer resources. So that's why I love comics so much.
Incredible. And in this podcast, we mainly interview folks who work in tech. And a lot of those folks, they have hobbies. A lot of them, they are artists as well. For example, I interview a bunch of like designers who are also an artist. And I wanted to talk more with you about your creative process, because I feel a lot of people might be feeling stuck. They don't know how to start and like doing like both things perhaps on top of like their
Yeah.
full-time job. So can you walk us through your creative process from initial concept to finished piece? And if you have any advice for folks who are struggling at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So I think like it all, I guess like this is the most common answer, but it all starts with an idea because I try to have always with me, or like as much as I can, pen and something that I can write on. Like I have like a tiny notebook where I keep track of like the things that I am thinking, or like while like no matter how crazy or silly or hard to do idea, I would just like write it down. So it all starts with an idea. And then I usually go into a massive rabbit hole, Thaisa, of like doing research on that idea and seeing how much and how far it can take me. And naturally what happens, at least to me, and this is like very personal, I let the idea sit, or like I let the idea go on pause for a little bit, because time right now for a lot of people, myself included, is scarce. And because I am trying to move more intentionally in my life and be more careful about what project I say yes to, sometimes saying yes to an idea, saying yes to a project, a comic or illustration, it means saying no to another thing that I have going on or that I want to do. And so by placing the idea to the side and let it sit for a little bit, I see how truly excited I am about this. And I will just almost like go to bed, think about it, and then a couple of days go by, and then I will think about it more and see like, okay, yes, I'm still thinking about this idea. I'm still drawn to do it. And so if I'm still thinking about it, I will notice how excited I am, how like its potential and whatnot. And then I turn it into the developing stages. And so, for example, if this is a comic, I will start writing a script, or like doing almost like a bullet point list of like all the things that I want to do in this comic, script ideas, almost like a brainstorming session. I will start sketching, experiment, play, trying different things, etc. And then once I have a more or less good sense of what, for example, this comic will look like, I will take it into the refinement stage. And so I will start like cleaning, taking things out, change, tweak, modify, see what works. This is also the time where I will ask a friend or a peer what they think about the comic, if the joke works, if it reads well, because this is the point where I've been so close to the project that sometimes I lose objectivity, or if it actually makes sense, or like if it reads well. It's almost like when you're asking your friend to read something out loud and they read it in a weird way and you're like, oh no, this is not working out. And so I will ask for feedback, and all of this trying to not to get too attached to the final result, because I think it's really important to be like, is this line really working? Can I change it into something else? And so when you're too attached to something, sometimes it's harder to make adjustments or to take things. So anyway, then I will paint the illustration. I will ink the lines. This is some like often the time, like the funnest part of the project, because more of like you're not using as your creativity as much, but you're using more of like your technical skills. And so I will put a podcast on the background, or I will listen to music, because there's not a lot of decisions to take. You're just like inking and painting. And the last test, I will test everything out, see if it still works, if the joke still makes sense. And I will ask myself, and this is like a very important step, I will ask myself, Thaisa, do I really like this? Am I proud of what I did? And I think it's important to ask myself those questions before publishing it or before sharing it to the world, because I have attached too much value in the past to what other people think, which I think in one way is important, but sometimes we place all the weight all the power into what other people think and or on the likes, on like the virality of it, or like how well it did in numbers, in views, in subscriptions and all of that. But as long as I am happy with the result, as long as I'm proud of what I did, I am holding some space, so to speak, to be like, no matter what happens with this piece of something that I just did, I am really happy with it. I am really proud of it. And of course, like, it's normal to feel sad if things didn't turn out the way they did. I'm not going to say like, don't think about what other people think, because it's normal. We're humans. Of course we think, we care about what other people think, but having those questions answered from the get-go, it's at least holding a little bit of space before this project, this process is completed. And so then I will just publish, and then it no longer belongs to me. It belongs to everybody. And so that's the whole process.
I love that. I love everything you said, because I feel sometimes people might think that the creative process is linear and super straightforward.
Yes.
And a lot of times it's not. It takes time. And as you said, you even need time to think, to process, and then you come back to it. And I love that you also mentioned research, right? Like sharing with friends so they can share feedback. If it is a joke, you can like understand if they got the joke or if there's like any misunderstanding. I love that you mentioned that as well.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share? And
I'm nodding like crazy, because I'm like, yes, especially like what you were saying about how linear that's the thing. Like, it's the process is never linear, because you will go back to it or take another route, or sometimes like the project will take you to a new direction, but then you have to go back and then take another path. Sometimes a friend will give you like some really good constructive criticism, and it makes you think the whole project all over again. And so it's very important, again, like to not be attached to the idea too hard, and also be open-minded to change it. Like the biggest changes that I have done around like scripts and graphic novels and like comics, and whether that's like a long-term project or a short-term project, like for example, a comic for Instagram, they have changed tremendously because people told me their thoughts, or like what they like, Fran, this joke, like I don't understand. And you're like, okay, so it's be willing to be wrong, the willingness to accept that sometimes things don't work out, and be willing to explore other alternatives. So I'm basically yesing all of it, what like everything you said around the linearity of like the lack of linearity around a process.
Amazing.
Marketing Against the Grain is brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, the auto destination for business professionals. If you want to know what's happening now in marketing, what's ahead, and how you can lead the way, this is the podcast for you. The hosts share their marketing expertise, unfiltered in the details, the truth, and like nobody tells it to you. Listen to Marketing Against the Grain whenever you get your podcast.
And what are some of the biggest challenges you face as a full-time creator?
Oh my God. Part of me, I love vulnerable questions, Thaisa. And when I read this for the first time, I'm like, God, there's so many, but I think like I can group them in three. I think like the first challenge is uncertainty, especially as a full-time freelancer, like living by like month by month, not knowing what's gonna happen is scary. I think in my case, I am really lucky in the sense that I have a Patreon account, and I think Patreon does help because it gives me some stability. But with any platform, I think nowadays you never know what the CEO is gonna do or say, or like you have to be prepared for any contingency. So uncertainty is like one of the major ones. Another challenge I will say is that in my case, very personal experience, but I am carving my own path in the sense that I'm not following any other person's journey but my own. I used to have an online store, and then I realized it wasn't working for me, and I want to be an author, but I don't know how to be an author, and how to be an author in the US, and like trying to, I don't know, like write this graphic novel, but I'm trying to do something that it hasn't been done before. So I'm like, sometimes it feels isolating and lonely when you, like, as an artist, as a content creator, as a freelancer, you're forced to almost like, I don't like this word, but like rebrand yourself every couple of years, because you as a person, you as a human change every couple of years. And so you, like, the resilience and the act of being flexible enough, again, to be willing to change and to notice yourself like, I don't want to do this anymore. What can I do now is kind of, again, is one of the challenges of like carving your own path and not having like a straight line that you're going to follow. Like, this is what I'm going to do for a living from now until I die. And that's not at least something that I want to do. And so that's one of the challenges. And the last one, and this is very personal and maybe not applicable to every freelancer, but I am single, Thaisa. And as a single person, having no one to rely on as a freelance is very scary, because both financially and emotionally, sometimes it will be nice to have someone, like, if I can be absolutely radically vulnerable with you, like sometimes I want to go home and be held, and like someone to tell me that everything's going to be okay. Or, hey, you know what, Fran, don't worry, this month I'm going to pay the bills while you do this. And not having that person sometimes is nerve-wracking, especially like when you have an elder pet. Like my cat is going to be 15 this January. And every time he gets sick, I'm like, oh my God, okay, I'm on my own. And again, might not be transferable to every freelancer person in the planet right now, but is being on my own, both work-wise and emotionally wise, is very scary. So right now, those are like the 3 challenges that at least I'm going through as a freelancer.
Thank you so much for sharing. And you started to answer my next question already. I love how you are really good in building a community. I have been following you for many, many, many years since you were living in Berlin. And, you know, I bought some things in your store. I still have your stickers.
Oh my God.
You mentioned about Patreon. It's an amazing way of building community. But I wanted to ask you, like, what role does community support play in your creative process?
Oh, man. I think like it plays such an important role. But part of me is also, if I can confess this, I will love to, like, for it to be bigger, like not to have necessarily a bigger community, but I'm hoping illustrators as a whole can be more united, especially with everything that is happening with AI art and how tricky it is for content creators and artists to survive in this day and age. I'm like, you guys, we need to unionize. We need to like more of like, I admire so much what is happening with like at least like this script writers and like the Writers Guild in the US, and like how much they have accomplished because of everything that has been happening with strikes and stuff like that. I'm like, God, we need to do this. Like it would be so cool to be able to do this as well with AI, but I think it's also tricky when you're dealing with a community that is also not always, but often introverted. And so I'm like, okay, how can we build a community amongst introverted people? And so I'm trying to do my part in regards to, like, sometimes I'm having the judgment and the self-invalidation thoughts of like, God, I wish I could do more, and like what I'm doing is not enough. But I guess like my tiny grain of salt or sand, as you will say, in this community effort is to create YouTube videos that try to talk about like mental health and like how to make money as an illustrator, how to make money as an artist, trying to share ways in which I am learning and improving my skills. But I see the efforts also by other people when they share, for example, pricing or on projects or what it's happening with. Again, sorry for bringing up this topic, but it's just happened to me that this week I share this like big brand who was using AI and it's plastered on all of the subways of New York City. And so I can't help but mention AI so much, especially this week. But like this is why I think community is so important. Like how can we unify this, the voice, or like how can we both point the finger to the brands who are using AI, how unsustainable in terms of the environment it is AI, and how can we make it better? How can we support artists online, especially the end of the year and the holidays coming up? And so all of this to say, Thaisa, like I want to do more, and I'm just like hoping that we can achieve something, especially with everything that is happening with AI. So I don't know if anything that I said makes sense.
No, it makes. And I love that you mentioned AI, and also the fact that maybe the illustrator community should like work more closely, which is hard when you are introverted. I can relate to that, but I feel like as an introverted, you can do a lot. Maybe we won't be the loudest person in the room, like for sure we won't, but there's a lot of other things we can do. You have your YouTube channel, you share a lot of personal, very important things. So you're doing a lot, and it's very, very inspiring. So, but it's a really good conversation to think about like how the illustrator community can like work more closely together and help each other. I love this.
I agree. It is definitely going to be a challenge, because I think, and again, this is an assumption, but like I think most of us work remotely and alone. And so it's like, how can we join forces when most of us are chronically online? And at the same time, how can we make this make this voice bigger, and how can we reverse what is happening with AI? And so yeah, I think like just like yesing to everything that you are saying, because oh God, we need to, we have to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And how do you maintain a healthy work-life balance, especially when your work is so personal? I was thinking about that.
It is hard. It is hard. And like, this is going to be no surprise for people, but Thaisa is setting boundaries, baby. Setting boundaries. And like, I know this is a word that people are dropping a lot, like, this is my boundary. But like, what those boundaries look like to me are, for example, I try as much as I can for weekends to be for resting. And that means like no answering work emails, trying to be away as much as I can from social media. Because again, the dopamine addiction that comes from scrolling Instagram is real. And luckily and unfortunately, I don't have TikTok, but I've seen people just like, oh my God, I love it. And also I hate it. And so I'm like, I'm going to stay away from TikTok, because I can, at this point, I think it's okay if I'm not. Anyway, so trying to rest during weekends as much as I can. Another boundary is not reading all the comments. I'm trying to be good at not checking, for example, comments on older videos or videos that have been up for like a month or something like that. I love reading comments, and I love answering comments when I share a comic or I upload a video, because it helps me be connected with the people that are watching my stuff. And I get amazing feedback, or like, hey, Fran, this was really useful. And so I don't want to miss that opportunity to connect with someone. But at the same time, the trolls usually are lurking, or like they show up on like after a while. So I'm trying to like be really good at that boundary as well. Also, when you were saying about like, how can you keep work-life balance when your work is so personal? I think like when I am dealing with filming myself or when I'm dealing with creating a comic that is very personal to me, I will ask myself, is this vulnerable or is this private? And I think there's a difference between, like, I can be vulnerable with you, Thaisa, and like tell you all of the things that makes me feel scared about being single, for example. But private is something that, for example, is this my story to share? Is this like someone else's story, or is this something that I will rather keep to myself because I don't know, like it's private for me, or I still haven't figured out how I feel about this. I think like checking in with yourself before you react or you do something is very important. And also like, and this is linked to the other one, is like the way that I keep a healthy-ish work-life balance is also be good at reading myself. And so noticing my feelings, noticing my thoughts, and being also gentle with myself. Like, do I really want to film today? Do I really am I in the right headspace to turn on the camera and talk to the camera right now? Because there are times, more often than not, where I don't want to be perceived, where I feel really insecure about my acne or the way I'm aging in the face of the internet. And like, sometimes I feel very depressed or like anxious. And I truly don't think I'm trying to be as honest as I can with who I am in front of a camera. But at the same time, if this is not conducive, if this is not a face that I want to necessarily show, or like am I forcing myself to, again, be perceived, is something that, okay, I need to check in and maybe not do it today. I can totally do this tomorrow. And also try not to fall into the comparison trap. Sometimes if I can be honest, Isa, sometimes I see other people who create YouTube channel and they film a lot. And I'm like, God, I wish I could be as comfortable to film as much as they do. But we all have different limitations. We all have different bandwidths. And again, going back to being gentle with myself, this is my capacity for today. This is as much as I can give today, and that's okay. So that's how I try to keep a healthish work and personal life balance.
Amazing. I'll be thinking about that. The difference between it's so hard to say this word, being vulnerable versus like being private. I will be thinking about that a lot. And I love this question because I got a lot of different answers and like get inspired over time. So which resource helped you in your journey that you want to share with us today?
Oh my God. There's so many resources, Thaisa. I think the first one that really helped me was therapy. But if I can be like very, very specific about therapy, it was DBT, which is called dialectical behavioral therapy. And it literally saved my life because it gave me so many tools around how to cope and like with coping with very difficult situations, how like it gave me skills to have difficult conversations, to be good-ish, because I'm still like working on it, but like how to be assertive, how to share what you want and need, and become good at reading myself and like reading my feelings, be more mindful and intentional. And so DBT seriously saved me, as well as antidepressants. I am trying to become really activist about antidepressants because I think they have a really bad reputation nowadays. I'm so happy that people are way more open to talk about therapy, but I think antidepressants and medication in general, they still carry a lot of weight. And when you think about antidepressants or medications, the media and Hollywood and movies and series have portrayed such a bad look with medication that they make you feel weird and you're not yourself, and you change and you become this other human. And yes, medication has side effects that are unpleasant, but not all the time. And so I'm not currently taking antidepressants, but I did for the longest time. And it really helped me during one of the toughest moments of my life. So antidepressants is one of the resources that I wanted to mention. Another one is journaling. Journaling, I started doing it during the pandemic because I was doing The Artist's Way, this book by Julia Cameron. Everybody was doing it at the time. And it's a practice that I do it now 3 times a week. And I really, really recommend it for people who are not only, I'm going to stop myself because I was going to say, like, I really recommend this for artists and creatives, but I recommend it to anyone. It's the only time in the day, Thaisa, that I have an actual, active dialogue with myself. Thinking it can be control. Like sometimes you're actively thinking about something and be like, oh, but most of the times it's automatic. You can control it. And so when you're journaling, and especially if you're doing it with your handwriting, when you're writing with your hand, it forces your mind to slow down. And you're thinking like, oh, there was something that bothered me the other day. Or like, oh my God, I can't stop thinking about this thing that this person told me. And because journaling is also a non-judgmental place, you can say whatever you want as many times as you need. You can word vomit. Those are the times that I think about, like, how to resolve a scene, how to resolve a comic that I don't know how to end, or like how to practice saying something difficult to a friend of mine or to a relative. And so journaling is where so much of my active thinking happens. And so hence why I can't recommend it enough. And I want to recommend one book that is Burnout by Emilia and Emily Nagoski. And this book, I came very hesitant when I started reading it because I've read so many books and like articles and podcast episodes on burnout. And so I'm like, oh my God, another book about burnout. And I was so wrong because it actually gives you tools about burnout and how to handle burnout, how to heal from burnout, how to end and like come to the stress cycle, how to bring it to closure, how to end a stress cycle, and why patriarchy plays such an important role on burnout culture and like the stress culture, especially on women. And so I am so happy that they address this because it's such a source of stress and pressure on today's society. And so can't recommend that book enough. Even if you're like, oh my God, I don't know if I want to read it, just like borrow it from your library. I listened to the audiobook, really funny actually, the audiobook. And so can't recommend enough. I've been recommending it to all of my friends and peers.
Amazing. I love everything you said. Incredible. And it's actually a great reminder for me because I was thinking about buying the Artist's Way book.
Really?
So I just took notes. So yes, I'm going to do this. I wanted to thank you for your time. This is incredible. I told you I have been following you for many years. And I love how I love how a lot of things in life, sometimes they are kind of like full circle. So you are the one who inspired me to put myself out there a little bit more. I feel as an introverted, as an immigrant, someone with English as a second language, podcasting is very scary.
Yeah,
like the scariest thing. Sometimes people say to me, oh, that's so nice. You have a podcast. You're natural. Like, no, I am not.
Also, because you have to listen to yourself and you have to edit yourself and listen to your voice and being like, God, I used the wrong word, or like I pronounced that word not the correct way. And so it's so challenging. I validate how you feel because it is weird, or like that's a judgment, but like it is difficult to be a content creator when you're speaking on a language that it's not the one that you grew up with.
Yeah, absolutely. And having you, it's just like amazing full cycle moment. And also because this is our last episode. I'm not sure if it is ever, but for a while. So this is our last episode.
Oh
so
God,
I'm so excited we are ending with you. So something else is going to happen next year. So the podcast will live in like maybe a different form. So I wanted to thank you, and I want to leave the last minutes for you to share anything you want to share and where people can find you. We are going to link to the description of the episode. And I recommend people to check your YouTube channel. I'm not an artist. Maybe I am. I have some issues like saying that, but I don't know how to draw. And I remember that I saw a video that you made about like the art supply materials that you like, that you mentioned you have like 5 different type of erasers, and I was like, that's so interesting.
I do. I have an eraser issue. Oh my God. Okay. So yeah, people can find me on most platforms, YouTube, Patreon, Instagram, at Franerd. Everything I'm sure is going to be down below in the description, because I know Franerd is kind of like a mouthful, but it's under my name as well, Fran Meneses. And yeah, thank you so much, Thaisa, for all of the kind words. It's really, what an honor to be in your podcast, and also what an honor to be, maybe, we don't know, the last episode. Like, I really wish you the best in this new chapter of self-discovery, and I can't wait to see what is going to happen in what you do. So thank you so much. I really appreciate.
Thank you.
That's it for today, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. I would love to hear your thoughts about the podcast and the episodes. Please message us with any insight, any feedback you might have, and also guest suggestions. Message us in your favorite social media platform. We are in all social platforms. And if you want to write us in a review, we will love that. Feel free to write us in a review on Apple Podcasts, Audible, Amazon, or any other streaming that you like. Thank you.